Hello, welcome to Disenthrall. I am Patrick, and today here in studio I have Kaysen.
Hey there, everybody. Oh. Hey, Kaysen here. I just wanted to say hello. And then also joining us, we have one Bexley Farnsworth, who's been an anarchist and a freedom lover for the past 9 years or so. So welcome to the show, Bexley.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you, although we're having a very intense topic today. I appreciate your sort of bravery coming on to discuss this publicly, right? So we're going to be talking about circumcision, the ethics of it, the kind of practice of it, the effects of it. This is something that you care quite a bit about. If you could kind of tell us a little bit about your background in this area.
Well, yeah, it's a pretty tough topic, but I've been talking about it since I was 14 or so. It was around the time my brother was born, actually. My mother didn't want him circumcised, and of course, my dad, he didn't understand back then, so he was very much pushing it, mainly because he's circumcised too. Anyways, my mother had put her foot down about it, and with our church that we were in, there was a doctor who was in the same church as us, and he found out that my mom didn't want my brother circumcised. So he went up to my father and started telling him, like, hey, just take him over to my house and I can circumcise him on one of our diaper tables.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I don't know, just back then I didn't have much of an opinion. Like, I was just kind of freaked out about it a little bit, but not much of an opinion. But after that happened, I'm like, there's something wrong with that. So from there, I picked up some books, started educating myself. I watched a couple of videos, and after that, I was done. I wasn't gonna feel comfortable with not saying anything at all when all this misinformation is going out, especially when there are people who work in the medical practice like that will go out of their way to circumcise a baby.
Yeah.
He was saying, yeah, we'll do it for free and everything. So.
Right. Yeah. So for those that don't know, I have a son. He's 3 years old, almost 4. He was circumcised. I shouldn't say it like that. I should take ownership. We made the decision to circumcise him, one that I very much regret to this day. I am also circumcised, which is kind of relevant to this debate. It's not just something personal I'm oversharing. So when you're in that position, especially if you haven't done the research and don't even know you need to do the research, because the medical professionals that you trust to advise you through the entire birthing process, you're already trusting them with the entire life of your wife and kid, tell you that it's normal, it's done all the time as a routine operation. It has positive health benefits to the kid, so you want to do it. When you're in the midst of making all these other medical decisions that in the moment feel a lot more important, and especially if you are circumcised, then this is your normal. My life is this is normal for me. It wasn't even something that I considered to question. It wasn't something that I questioned, unfortunately, now that I'm aware. So there's a lot of guilt for that, for me, for having sort of passed that on for my son. And so that's why it was important that I wanted to do this show today, to sort of put it out there and get some facts out there. Like, one of the most important facts that if my doctor had told me would have immediately made me question the entire thing was that no medical association in the world recommends circumcision as a routine operation for little boys. None. They just don't. It's not a recommended operation as a routine thing that should be done for everyone. There's certain circumstances, right, that I'm sure you can kind of tell us about, like when you might need to do it. So, I mean, are you aware of, would you like to talk about that any before we kind of get into all the bad stuff, or?
About the medical necessary reasons to circumcise?
Yeah, like when you need to, when it's important. When should you?
I would definitely consider it if the child cannot pee. So there's a rule where a baby might be born with, I have such a tough time pronouncing it, but it's like
Yeah.
It's where the urethra is kind of developed oddly. So with that, like, medical professionals are always saying, look, he definitely needs to get circumcised with this, but later in life, in adulthood, they usually use the foreskin to reconstruct it. So a lot of intactivists, like myself, when we discuss this,
Intactivists, can you define that term for us?
yeah, intactivists is, people like me who go about around as activists, but for circumcision. So we're mainly promoting, leave your baby whole. This is why it's not medically necessary. So
Right. Okay. Yeah.
um,
So
but
I didn't know about the urethra one. I knew that, in some cases, the foreskin is just too small of an opening, and it's unable to retract properly. So,
that's called phimosis, and you can't diagnose that in
oh,
anyone under the age of 18 because uh, the foreskin is meant to fuse to the glands, and it's doing that to keep outside bacteria out, like the feces, outer bacteria, anything like that. So it's meant to fuse to the glands. So often doctors diagnose your child with phimosis when that's perfectly normal and healthy. It's usually around puberty that the foreskin starts to retract, and by the time there's adulthood and they have phimosis, well, there's also alternatives on how to fix that without actually circumcising.
I see.
But that
Okay.
is, yeah, but that is a choice for people with phimosis if weigh out their options and do some research. Um, but yeah, so for like as a general rule, it's if he can pee, let him be. Because
Interesting.
if he can, right? Because if he can pee, he's fine. Often when babies get infections, like girls when they get infections, uh, we use medicine. We use antibiotics. We use change of diet. We bathe differently. We figure out anything else to treat the infection without amputating any of the body parts. So I think it's odd that, boys don't deserve that, or they're made out to be more unclean when girls get 4 times more infections than intact and circumcised boys. So
Mhm. Okay, so why don't we start going into exactly what the procedure is? Like, just let's define the procedure, and then maybe talk about the downsides, because there's a long list that I'm sure we can go through that I never knew about. That's why it's important for me that we do this show, even though it's kind of uncomfortable to talk about. It's important that there are downsides that no one told me. So
right.
the procedure. Do you want to describe the procedure? I think you're probably going to be better at it than me. I'm so awkward right now. Why is this so awkward?
Well, because a lot of people they're like, oh, you're talking about circumcision, that means you're obsessed with penis. But yeah, so I
Right.
understand the awkwardness. I get accused of that all the time. So as far as the procedure goes, it's very invasive. Uh, Oftentimes you're told it's just a snip. It's so much more than just a snip. They have to insert like a probe inside the foreskin and separate it, so they tear the adhesions, the skin away from the glands. Because like I said, when you're born, the glands are fused to the foreskin. Foreskin is fused to the glands. So they have to rip that apart. And that's the equivalent of ripping off your fingernail.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so that's pretty painful, and usually when you see that happen in a circumcision video, that's when you hear the baby start screaming. From there, they'll take a clamp. It also depends on the type of tool that they use. More popular one is the Gomco, and with that, so they slice the foreskin in half after that, finish tearing off the adhesions, and then they insert like a bell type thing over the glands, and then they insert it through this tool where the rod kind of pulls up into, and with that they pull up as foreskin into it, then they clamp it and then tighten it, and it cuts off the foreskin, and they use a knife to finish cutting it, and it stops the bleeding and such. So after they cut off the foreskin, then they take off the bell, and it's done. The glands are exposed and bleeding and raw. And so people don't talk.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry.
The first thing, the first kind of counter I've gotten when talking to people about this is that some people have literally said the words that babies that young don't really feel pain the same way we do. Literal words, which is just, I mean, this is not an argument, but is the stupidest thing. Like, if you've had a baby, you know they feel pain. Sorry, go ahead.
They feel way more than adults do.
They feel more, exactly, yes.
They're fragile. They're new. They're brand new to this world. Everything is so sensitive to them. Their hearing, their skin, their pain neurons, everything is just super fragile at that stage.
Yeah, so you're born into the world. You're a brand new person. You're experiencing things for the first time. You get maybe an hour or two being held by your mother, and then usually in the first day, they come in and they say, "Hey, are you ready for the circumcision? we're just gonna take him away for a few minutes, and he'll be right back." And whatever. And they use like lighthearted voices, and they cart your little baby off to a side room where they do a little torture on him and then bring him back. And there are lasting effects of that on them physiologically, right? So you can probably talk more about this, but I know I know that like cortisol levels, stress hormone levels, are elevated for like 6 months, and this is just what they've measured. I'm sure it goes on longer than that, but 6 months after the circumcision, babies that have been circumcised have higher stress hormones and cortisol levels than babies that haven't. I'm sure maybe you could tell us about some of the other negative effects.
Yeah, I mean, they did a brain scan on an infant before and after a circumcision. They were able to measure out those stress hormones and such. Some men, like you said, within the first 6 months, they have those stress hormones still going on with them. But some men, that tends to linger with them. Like, they feel more angry all the time. They're having depression. They're having all sorts of issues mentally and emotionally. And a lot of them don't even know why until they learn what circumcision is, and then they feel violated after that. So
there's a really good book that I've recently finished reading called The Body Keeps the Score. I would recommend, maybe we can find a link to that, throw it up. It talks about how trauma, mental and or physical, have real, lasting, permanent physiological changes on your nervous system. So like one of the quotes from the book is that a nervous system, once touched by trauma, a person that has been traumatized is experiencing the world through a different nervous system from that point forward. Like it is such a drastic physiological change after you've experienced trauma. So to do this right from the beginning sort of makes it normal, it changes how that baby experiences the world, especially in the near term. There's behavioral changes in babies. They act differently. They respond to pain more sensitively after that than before. Among other things, like we could probably just sit here for an hour and a half. There are other videos that we can also link in the description that spend an hour and a half listing the negative effects of this of this surgery.
Right, and one of the most common side effects of circumcision is it actually alternates the breastfeeding connection with their parents. So a lot of times the baby will stop nursing completely.
Mm.
And so they'll end up having to switch over to formula and bottle feeding.
Also, it's like a secondary form of torture that most parents don't even realize is happening. They have this done to their penis. They get brought back to the parent, and they put a diaper on them, and then the little boy pees in the diaper, and then the uric acid is now sitting on that open surgery wound that's trying to heal, and so it stings, and it's just like it's a continuing thing, and people don't even it makes me so angry that I did this. I let this be done. I did this to my son. It makes me like I'm trying not to start crying right now because of how mad I was that no one told me that my little tiny precious baby, who I was so happy to have, was basically, being, pouring salt on an open wound in his diaper after this. I'm like blubbering here. I'm sorry. I'm just, yeah. So
It's okay. It's hard.
I'm glad that we have people that are trying to get this word out. I thank you for that. Unless you have any objections, I would like to do something that's probably more challenging to our viewers on this channel than we've ever done before. But I think it's fair. So if you are thinking about having your son circumcised, do you think it's a good idea? If you are a parent that had this done, I think you need to watch the next several minutes because we're going to play a video. It's nothing extreme. It's not like some shock video that shows like an insane circumcision happening that is out of the norm. This is a very sort of what they would probably call routine, normal circumcision. And we're not playing it to shock you. We're going to play this video to inform you. I think if you've had this done to your kid, you owe it to them to watch this video so that you can better empathize with them. And for those that are considering having it done, you need to at least be fully informed of what you're about to do. I think it's fair. It's traumatizing for me, so I would forgive you if you wanted to mute it, but I think we should play it. Kason, can you kick that off?
بص يا فندم انا عايز منك الشاشه ديت في البيت تبلها بزيت نارجين كل وقت صلاه. كل ايه؟ وقت صلاه. زيت نارجين كل وقت صلاه. وهتستناني في الاستراحه 5 دقايق وترجع لي بس هتقطع.
All right. Yeah. So at least you can be aware of what you're asking to be done or what you have done. And you mentioned something before the show. We were just talking briefly that there are parents that have circumcised their kids that I forgot what you called them. It was a group of people that kind of work. Can you kind of talk about those people?
Regret parents.
Regret parents.
Yeah.
It's very apt name.
That's what they call themselves. And sorry, that video is just. Ugh, I'm sorry. Yeah, they're called regret parents because they did a circumcision or they consented to getting their child circumcised, and they were informed much later or after the circumcision they were able to see the behavioral changes, like I mentioned earlier with breastfeeding. The breastfeeding relationship between mother and child is severed, or the baby, they see the look in their baby's face where it's all drawn out, pale, bags under their eyes. You can tell that they're traumatized and they've been through a lot of pain. And so from there, they learned something. Even sometimes parents have a couple kids before they learn because they finally did the research or somebody informed them, like, what circumcision is. And from there, they were able to, learn about it. And from there, they get together for support because no parent wants to hurt their child. You know, they're
Right.
not bad parents. They're trying, like, everyone is just trying to do what they think is best for their child. They don't want their child to grow up, where they are having medical complications or infections and all that, which is all very common reasons to circumcise, even though they.
You want to run down
about-
should we run through the big ones? So what, STDs is one?
Oh yeah, STDs. Circumcision doesn't prevent any of that shit.
Right.
I'm sorry. Wear a fucking condom.
Yeah.
Or
I think they
yeah.
recommended it for like sub-Saharan Africa or something where AIDS is very prevalent as something that might reduce the chances. But even if you're even if you're circumcised, they're still, of course, recommending you have to wear a condom anyway. So if you're wearing condoms anyway, why are we cutting genitals?
right, their reasoning is just stupid, because if you're going to be stupid about sex, if you're going to have sex willy-nilly with just anyone without knowing their medical history, you're being dumb, and that's how you get STDs. It doesn't matter if you're intact or circumcised. If that were the case, if circumcision prevented that, why is the U.S. so high in STD rates? It's because people are being dumb about sex. They're not using condoms. They're not protecting themselves. They're having sex with just anyone while not getting tested. Like, people don't get tested anymore. Every time they ask, they got weirded out. They're like, why? What do I do that? I'm clean. They feel embarrassed about it rather than, just being safe. So, but meanwhile, medical professionals are encouraging circumcision, even though most of the U.S. is circumcised and we're still getting STDs.
Right. So what else do we have? We have infection and cleanliness.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, girls are 4 times more likely to get infections than boys. A common infection is yeast infection or urine infection. So,
right.
Yeah, urine infections, which foreskin doesn't cause. It's usually a dieting issue, or you're not being clean, and that's not the foreskin's issue. It's not a birth defect. Otherwise, why aren't we circumcising girls when they get infections 4 times more? Being a girl,
That's an interesting point.
I've had to deal with these infections. You know what I do? I drink more water. I eat more blueberries and strawberries, vitamin C,
Right.
get my vitamin C. I changed what I wear, so like switching to cotton.
Yeah, so you didn't like cut up your genitals to help with that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, never needed to.
That's good. And as far as just cleanliness, it is an additional step of hygiene, right? To clean that area better if you're intact. But it's not like it's some insane hard process to do. It's just like it's like an extra set of ears you got to clean once in a while, or an extra set of teeth you got to brush. It's not. 80% of the world is intact. I think it's not going to be too big of a deal.
Just use water.
Right.
Take a shower. It's not that hard to convince boys, like, hey, just wash your dick.
Yeah.
They're not going to have any issue with that. They're like,
you're going to wash it anyway.
Yeah.
Just do a little extra, no big deal.
Okay, I've had to, I've worked as a nanny for a long time, and I've had to help raise or, babysit, take care of boys. They're not going to have any issue with taking care of themselves. They are practically obsessed.
Right.
I'm not trying to be gross with saying that, but that's just kind of, typical child behavior.
Right.
They're curious, or,
Yeah, sure. So
yeah.
we've covered STDs, we've covered cleanliness. What are the other common, wives' tales about the benefits of circumcision that people are worried about passing up when they make that choice?
Being made fun of in the locker room, or girls don't like foreskin. Both are bullshit.
Okay.
The locker room argument. Guys get made fun of for even looking at your genitals. So, plus, using that reason to circumcise now doesn't make any sense, because for the most part, the rates of circumcision are really low, because people are being informed, or insurance companies won't even cover circumcision anymore because it's purely cosmetic.
Really? I didn't know that. That's great news.
Yes. So for the most part, most insurance companies do not cover it, and parents are having to pay out of pocket. I know people who didn't circumcise just because they couldn't afford it. Their insurance wouldn't cover it. So.
Okay. Yeah, like when I was in school locker rooms, there were certainly plenty of other things that got made fun of, tragically, than that. In fact, that never even came up in any high school locker room I was in. Interesting.
I got made fun of my face, but I guess I should have just ripped off my face.
Yeah. Circumcise that thing. What else? So, make fun of. You got anything, Kaysen? No? Okay. All right. Well, I don't want to like belabor this and try and draw it out into a video that's longer than it deserves to be. I wanted to just very quickly sort of make the case to maybe reach a few parents that are still in the state I was in as a parent, where it was normal. It wasn't even questioned. I didn't even know there was a reason not to. So I think that's kind of our purpose. Was there any other kind of topics or important things that you wanted to talk about with this?
Well, we went through all that. I guess I got two other ideas, but one of my biggest things is, men who have been circumcised and choosing not to circumcise their sons. I gotta say, I look up to men who do that, or who can admit that they were wrong in doing so if they've already done it. The reason being is that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yes.
I mean, I can't imagine, being circumcised and then being told what was done to me, being convinced that it's the only way to go, or that it's better, and then having to learn that it's different. A lot of people take that defensively, and instead of being open to learning, they completely block themselves off, and it actually makes them more aggressive and saying, well, I'm definitely going to do it because this hurts my feelings, or it contradicts everything what I was taught. So I like to address men often with this, just because I have to say I look up to men who can admit they're wrong, or deny it, or choose to protect their sons despite what was done to them.
Right. It's when you're talking to somebody that's already had kids and already made this decision to have them circumcised, it's a lot harder to talk to them about it, because you're not just talking to their frontal lobe trying to make the case with the data and the facts of circumcision. You're talking almost directly to the potential guilt they would feel if they accepted your position. So
right.
There's a huge bias against not even listening to this discussion if it's been done, and that goes for a bunch of other things, right? Like if you're a public school teacher, getting paid with money that's been extorted from the general public, you're being paid with extorted, stolen money. And to convince a public school teacher of that, or a cop, or a soldier, or anything of that fact, they have to, to accept that fact, they have to also take on the guilt for having done that without knowing. So it's difficult. Yeah.
Right. It is. And whenever I'm discussing this, my intent is never to shame anyone or put them down. Though I gotta say, the parents that are like, well, I'm going to do it anyways, despite the information that was shared with me, that's kind of where I start to lose my patience with that, because it's like, doesn't your child deserve a little better than that? I mean, I don't have children of my own yet, but I would imagine that having children, you want to do better for them. You want what's best for them. That should be our goal, being parents and guardians, to want better for our kids despite what was done to us. But
yeah,
I see people
The most important argument that actually I completely failed to make so far, the one I wanted to make on this show, was the ethical argument. Why are you not ethically allowed to genitally mutilate your baby? It's because it's not your body. It's not your choice.
Right.
You can't go up to people that you can't hurt other people, and your baby is not your property. And because it's not your property, it deserves its own agency and its own choice over its own body. And that choice might come later. They might, reach the age of maturity where they're sentient and aware and capable of reasoning for themselves, and they might decide to get circumcised. It's always an option for them later. But it's wrong to make that decision for someone to modify their body for no good reason, without their consent, when they're not even able to consent or to know what's happening. And it's even worse to do it when they've just arrived on the planet and everything is new, and you're basically potentially coloring their entire nervous system and their outlook on the world.
Right. I don't think you can be an advocate for freedom and liberty when you're going to force your opinion on somebody else's body, especially when they cannot consent.
Right.
Like, it contradicts everything that you speak out for. So if you're an anarchist or a libertarian or somebody who advocates for freedom, you can't be that. If you demand freedom for yourself, but you deny it completely for others, especially when they have no clue what's going on.
Yeah, I've talked about this before. Parents do not own their children. Children are not property. The best way to think of your children is that you have temporary custody. You're the current one that sort of possesses someone's future personhood. Your job is to caretake them until at which point they can sort of take control over themselves, because they own themselves. You have a responsibility to the future adult version of that kid to provide them with a healthy body, a healthy nervous system, free of trauma, somebody that wasn't hit by a car or had their genitals mutilated without their consent. It's your responsibility to sort of provide that to their adult future self. It's not up to you, I guess, is the ethical point of the situation.
Right, and pushing a baby out of your vagina or giving birth at all is not an excuse to do whatever the hell you want to your children. I mean, you chose to have sex and get pregnant, so that's kind of your fault that you need to deal with. I'm not trying to be negative about birth and, getting pregnant, but it's like, if you're gonna do that and then use that as an argument to do whatever the hell you want to your kids, like spanking, abusing, like that same argument that's used for that to circumcise could be used for rape. Oh, well, it's my child, it's my choice.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, either somebody has to own everything, right? So like, I own myself. Who owns the kid? They own themselves. They're just not quite ready to sort of take control of that property fully yet. It's your job to protect it, not to harm it.
Right. Your job as a parent is to teach, how to think, not what to think, not project your agenda on them.
So I've been kind of chatting back and forth with the Phantom in the chat, and he was saying the benefits of circumcision lower the risk of STDs, which I think we kind of covered there. It also prevents or helps prevent UTIs or urinary tract infections. But also he mentioned lower rates of penile cancer. I don't know if that's something you might be able to speak to at all, and then there's a kind of a follow-up with that as well.
Yep.
All those have been debunked. It doesn't lower penile cancer.
Well, I mean, it technically could, right? So if a cancer was going to develop on the foreskin, cutting the foreskin off will prevent the cancer from developing on it.
But if cancer was going to develop on my arm, removing my arm would also prevent that from developing.
So should we chop everyone's arm? Should we chop women's breasts off when they're babies to prevent them from one day getting breast cancer?
Right. If you get cancer, then you deal with it. You don't use it as a preventative measure. Right. It doesn't work that way. Because circumcised men get penile cancer anyways.
Yeah.
They can. So amputation on a healthy body part doesn't make any sense. Like, to prevent breast cancer, my parents should have removed my nipples and milk ducts.
Yeah, that would have, reduced your chances of breast cancer.
Well, that might be true, but my breasts have a purpose just as much as your foreskin have a purpose. So like the whole circumcision prevents this.
And
It
so
doesn't.
one thing that's hard for me to talk about because I don't have one, but I'm told, and what I read is that the foreskin is a very sensitive part of sexual pleasure for men. So when you remove that part, you're removing a certain percentage, a large percentage of the, pleasurable surface of the organ, which can have negative sexual effects for men. I think if you're circumcised, you have a 4 times greater chance of requiring or needing or using at some point in your life, what do you call them, like Viagra,
Right. Yeah.
boner pills.
Yeah. Yeah, it reduces a lot of sensitivity. Like anywhere between 12,000 to 70,000 nerve endings are cut away with the foreskin, and often the frenulum is removed. And the frenulum is a very sensitive part of the penis, and circumcision often removes it. It's located underneath the glands, kind of underneath the urethra. Uh, it Men can, orgasm so easily with that, and with just that area, like you could just stimulate that one frenulum,
Yeah,
and that's enough pleasure for them.
right.
It isn't to say they're premature in ejaculation, which is another dumb argument people use to circumcise, which I think is dumb that you should alter your child's sex life.
Right.
But the foreskin serves purpose. The reason why intact men have more sensitivity is also because the foreskin is protecting the glands and keeping it moist. Men who are circumcised tend to have more dried out looking glands, and they also have a scar. And depending on how loose or tight the circumcision is, they'll also have a lot of inner foreskin that's exposed.
Yeah.
Or if it's a low circumcision, then none of the inner foreskin is exposed, and it's usually much harder for them to feel sensation.
I have an acquaintance. I won't get any more specific than that, but theirs was done in such a way as not enough skin was left, and so as they got older and they started getting erections and trying to have sex, their erections were very painful because the skin would stretch. They didn't have enough skin because too much of it was removed. I mean, there's just, why even risk this? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. And another complication is when they do get erections, so much skin is taken away that it actually pulls the pubic skin up onto the shaft, and so they have pubic hair all up their shaft. People don't realize that's actually a circumcision side effect. It's become a normal thing here in the U.S. because, men are circumcised here.
Interesting. And so,
yeah.
Like taxes coming out of your paycheck, I think if more parents were actually in the room when this stuff was happening, they would end it a lot faster because they would see, like what the video we just showed, they would see their little kid going through that, and they'd probably freak out and stop it in the middle. I mean, yeah, all right.
Right, yeah. I guess another argument that parents will use, because there are some parents that will actually witness their child's circumcision, sometimes they say, well, my kid only cried a little bit, or they slept through it.
Shock.
Shock.
Yeah.
When you go in so much shock with something, your body doesn't know how to react except for shut down.
I can't remember the exact percentage. I looked this up right before the show because an infant can go into shock and do go into shock during this procedure. You think shock is a healthy thing for a little infant? I mean, read The Body Keeps the Score. It's a great book. It talks exactly about this kind of trauma. So.
Right. And they also say that another good reason to circumcise is so that they don't have to do it better later in life. Most men don't choose to do it later in life. A very small percentage does. But even then, they get pain medication afterwards and an actual bandage that isn't a feces-filled diaper. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I forgot. I wanted to add that in there.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, so I get a lot of men who say, well, I wouldn't want to do it as an adult because I don't want to remember the pain. You're an adult. You're a man. You can handle pain. You shouldn't expect an infant to do it because you don't want to remember something.
Yeah, and the anesthetics they use are all topical, and so they tell you they're going to use anesthetic, but they I think one of the studies showed that there are no known anesthetics used in this procedure that actually that block all the pain. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very light.
Was there any other kind of pieces to this that you'd like to go over?
Yeah, well, lately, I've been getting together some information to write an article because I'm feeling quite drained with this topic that I feel like I want to take a break. But recently, I stumbled over some blogs that were sexualizing infant circumcision.
Oh,
So when I came across that, I decided I needed to do more in-depth research with this, make an article about it, show screenshots, provide more information, and then post it, and then I can take a break from.
yeah, you need a break after this one. I saw a Facebook post by you on it, and it just, I mean, it blew my mind that this was even a thing. This is probably the most disgusting stuff I've ever seen in my life.
It's so heartbreaking.
So there are people that have blogs fetishizing circumcising of little boys. That's kind of the summary, right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, if it was towards just adults, I wouldn't give a shit because they're keeping it between them, and everybody involved is consenting. I think consent is a huge, huge thing that you need when altering someone's body. A lot of them aren't for keeping it with just adults. They believe that they need to do it to infants as well. I did talk to one of them who is circumcised, and he became a circumsexual. That's what they call each other, circumsexual.
Oh, God.
He was saying how when he found out that he was circumcised, he didn't know how to cope with it. He felt so violated that something was taken away from him, and he did some research on the foreskin, and it made him feel depressed. And so he was telling me about about this, and he said that he didn't know how, but his brain made a switch with it where instead of directing anger about it, he sexualized it, and it helped him cope better. So I can understand, things like that, because there are rape victims who sexualize rape afterwards because it's a way of regaining that type of control over your body that you didn't have before.
I see.
So I was able to gain an understanding of that, and he also went into behaviors of adults who have been circumcised, and then they have to do it to their sons because they can't imagine their sons having something that they don't have. It connected a lot of pieces to a puzzle that it just explains everything.
I think we really need to start holding doctors accountable.
Right.
When I was going through this with my son, I guess I really just need to be blaming the doctor as much as myself. Yes, I should have done the research. As a parent, it is your responsibility to do the research on every single thing that you do with your kid. Know what you're doing. It's your only job is to know what you're doing and do the right thing for the right reasons for your child that you created. It's your job. But it's also the doctor's job, maybe more so than the parent in that instance, because the parents are looking to these doctors. Yeah.
Right. In medical school, they're not taught about the foreskin functions at all. And in fact, the anatomy books that show pictures of the penis and how it is, testicles, shaft, all the information regarding that. They don't have pictures of foreskin. They don't have pictures of what an intact penis looks like, except for on babies and how to cut the foreskin off. They don't have any other information. So nurses and doctors aren't even trained on foreskin care or anything like that. They're only taught, circumcise. And if you don't circumcise, retract the foreskin, even though that causes infections. So
okay.
The medical industry really, really needs an update on this misinformation.
And it's still a religious thing for others too. I know that there's those sick rabbis that will come and do the circumcision, and it's part of the ritual, and I call it a ritual disparagingly, that they literally suck the blood out after they do it. Like, it's just insanity that this stuff still it is 2017. It is insane.
Right. Why can't your child decide if they want to be in that religion? Why, like, I mean, you can raise them with those beliefs if you want, I guess, but why force it on their bodies when they turn 18 or they are mentally capable of understanding what's going on? Make that switch. I feel that if you do it that way, them joining the religion is that much more
meaningful.
Yeah,
Because they have a choice.
It has more impact.
Yeah.
Yeah. They willingly chose to participate in that. I know that for the Jewish religion, there's alternatives to doing the bris. I forgot what it is because I don't
The
really.
bris, that's what it's called. Yeah, I couldn't remember.
Yeah, yeah. I haven't really done much research on what religious people can do alternatively. I know Christians don't need to do circumcision anymore because Christ died on the cross, and after that, you don't need to do it anymore. So, and plus, in the New Testament, if the
that true,
Bible, it
Kason?
says not circumcised.
He's my religion guru over here.
Yeah. Paul writes, and I can't quote it because it's been a while since I've been reading the Bible, but what does it mean to be circumcised or uncircumcised? For we are all the same under Christ. I'll look that up real quick and get you the legit reference real quick.
Yeah.
He's like a walking Bible. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I've never met somebody that can quote a Bible so perfectly all the time.
Right, and I read the Bible 3 times, and I still have to go online and relook things up. Like, what did it say again?
Okay, so what is it?
Oh, well, while I'm looking that up, we actually had another question that was just asked about the ethics of it. Should parents and doctors be put in jail for choosing circumcision?
I don't think it would help anything. What does it do? I mean, it's kind of like the abortion argument where people say, well, people should be put in jail for doing abortions, but actually raised the rates of abortion. It's also making alcohol legal. That backfired too. I think sharing information is the key to this. I don't think going to jail or threatening parents to do something good is going to help anyone.
I think a great deterrent to circumcision and abortion would be for these doctors to be held account for the actions that they're taking.
Yeah, the people doing the circumcision, definitely.
I really don't know any parents that would go that far out of their way to get a black market back alley circumcision. I mean, yeah. So I hold the doctors accountable. They're taking oaths to do no harm, right?
Exactly. I do know that there are definitely people who would do the back alley way, but I think for the most part, parents who
some terrible people that. Oh my God.
Yeah, I've like I said, I've been arguing about this topic since I was 14, so I've definitely run into some people, but I think for the most part, parents with clear heads wouldn't do that shit,
Right. Wow. Okay. All right. Are we good?
I also had one more just come in as well, asking.
I love the live questions. This is why we live stream.
So if we have some questions, throw them out.
Do it.
Can intact men be expected to feel a degree of shame about escaping into adult life unscathed from the circumcision that so many of their peer groups experienced? Should intact men feel shame?
What? No. Why?
No. That doesn't make any sense. Should intact women be shamed? I mean,
should people that didn't go to war and get PTSD feel shame? No.
Should women who have different size of their vulvas, and I like to call them petals, because everyone's genitals look different. Should we all be shamed for how small or big penises are, or how deep or not deep a vagina is, or just shaming your body? Does shaming your body make sense? Something that you were born with that you can't help.
Somehow escaping life undamaged is definitely not something to be guilty, to feel shame about. I mean, if anything, be happy, and then it gives you perspective on everyone else around you that's damaged.
Yeah, I definitely. I'm sorry. That just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I mean, I grew up bullied. I was bullied for 7+ years. I was shamed for my body, but I don't feel shame for it.
Mm.
So I guess that's how I'm applying this. Like, why?
Right. And then also I did find the reference in Galatians 5 if anybody wants to check it out in their translation. But it says, again, starting at verse 3, again I declare to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obligated to obey the whole law, referring to like the law of Moses, so the Old Testament. You who are trying to be justified by the law have been alienated from Christ, and you have fallen away from grace. Verse 4. And then if you skip down just a little bit down to verse 6, it says, for in Christ Jesus neither circumcision nor uncircumcision has any value. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. So Galatians 5:6, if you wanted to store that in your data banks for later.
There you go. Okay, Bexley, thank you for joining us for the uncomfortable topic. I hope that we can have you back on for a less uncomfortable topic in the future. I enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, this is my first time doing something like this, and I actually enjoyed talking, even
Cool.
though.
Well, you did well, and we can definitely do it again. We can talk. So I guess the last thing I wanted to mention is to all the viewers. We have had a Patreon for a while. It's kind of been dysfunctional. We haven't really talked about it much. But what we wanted to start doing is after our live stream, and we're not going to do this today, but after our live stream, we often we continue the discussion with whatever guests we've had. And sometimes these discussions go on for 45 minutes, and they're really good. And we wish sometimes that we had kept live streaming so that people could get on this stuff. And we thought, well, what a great way to incentivize a Patreon to give people a reason to kind of support the channel and support what we're doing. So just to give you a heads up, we're probably going to post a Patreon link either in the description of this video later or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/disenthrall. You're welcome to check the Patreon page out, and then what we'll probably do is start having our after talks live for the patrons.
The patrons.
Yes,
I like that.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for coming on again, Bexley, and we'll talk to you guys later.